it's great to see you here. It's great. I know some of you, first service or second service people, are worshiping together maybe for the first time. Isn't that crazy? I mean, you guys are both here in the same service, and that never happens. So, hey, we're really glad you're here. Thanks for getting up either earlier or being willing to come later to our service today. If you're joining us online, thank you also. We are in the middle of a series we're calling Make Waves. It's the same theme that we walked our kids through this week in Summer Jam. We actually completely took it from that because we were reading over our material for kids that they just went through. We're like, man, some of this stuff's pretty good. Like, I think that we as a church need to look at this. And all of it is around this idea that we want to make waves, or we want to make an impact in the world around us. Because the truth is, maybe you were like me and I grew up being told by everyone around me that I could change the world. And then I realized I probably can't. But you know what? I can make a difference in the world around me, and I may not be able to change the whole world, but I can change the world around me and impact where I am. And those waves go beyond me. And maybe it's not me that directly makes a difference in the whole world. But here's what I know is one man and 12 of his followers started a movement that has impacted the entire world, and it's because they started a wave. They made a difference. They made that wave. That's what we talked about all week with your kids who came and joined us. We had an incredible week. We had 4 kids make professions of faith, which is pretty exciting for a church our size. So we loved that. And here's the greater thing is we got to plant the seed in hearts of kids, and some of them had never heard the gospel message before. And it's because we as a church are willing to show up, to take off work, to be here. Right? Your tithes and your offerings go to help share that gospel message with children and with kids. And so we are so appreciative of that. This week, we are going to continue through the Gospel of Luke. We've been in it for several months now, but we're looking in Luke chapter 9, and we'll jump in here in verse 21 here in a minute. Before we do, I want to share with you one of my favorite things to do over the summer, especially with my kids. And that is we love to play board games in our house. In fact, like the little case that holds our board games is not large enough. Like they're spilling out. They're like stacks on top of it and like some on the ground next to it because we love to play board games. But here's the thing you need to know about me as a parent. I am never going to let my children win at anything. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't, go easy on them. It doesn't matter what sport or game we're playing. If it is within my ability to beat them, I'm going to do that. Like, we don't play handicap rules either. Like, if I'm playing any of my children in basketball, I'm not good at basketball, but I'm going to win because I can smack the ball out of their hands all day long. Now, if you're like, man, he's really ruthless. Yes. But I will say this, one of the things that we've been doing is we've been playing the game Settlers of Catan with our oldest Jackson. Some of you are Settlers fans. Some of you are like, man, he's one of those nerds, and you are correct. I am. And while I still beat him every game, I've started to help him understand the strategy and maybe some of the different ways that he can do some different things in the game that would benefit him to teach him. So while I don't go easy on him, I do help him understand along the way. But here's the idea, right? And most of us are like this, or I think many of us are like this, is there's this idea of winning that we have. And that we have this competitive nature. We surround ourselves with sports. How many Avs fans, right? Pretty exciting time to be an Avs fan, right? We have this idea of what victory looks like. I am a University of Alabama Crimson Tide football fan. I have been my entire life. It's good to be an Alabama fan. This year was kind of rough, but we have so many trophies that we could spare a year, right? We love to surround ourselves with victory. There's a reason that every time a team wins any type of championship that they grow in their fan base is because people want to be fans of winners. They don't want to be fans of losers. Well, some people hate the Yankees enough like that we just don't ever want to see them win even when they're good. But this is a perception that we have. We understand what winning looks like and we want it. And there's something even about Americans that, man, do we ever love to win. Like it is written in us that what victory looks like and what it takes to get it and what we should do to have it every single time. When I watch the Olympics, I get angry if America is not the very top medal performer. of any Olympic sport. And like some of them I've never even heard of, but I don't know why we didn't win it. But I want to look at today a different definition for winning. Because I think that sometimes in the culture that we're in, it gives us this mindset of what victory looks like that I think at times can be at odds with what we see in Scripture. And in this story we're about to look at, remember, we've been talking about Jesus. 2 weeks ago, Jesus performed this miracle where he fed 5,000 people with just a little bit of food, just a little bit of fish and a little bit of bread. And then right after that, Jesus asks his disciples this question, hey, who do the crowd, all these people, who do they think that I am? Well, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're Elijah, others say you're a prophet who's been raised again. And then he looks at his disciples and goes, but hey, who do you guys think that I am? And Peter, right, one of his disciples responded and said, you are the Christ of God. Right? You are the Messiah. You are the one who is sent to save everybody. That word Christ, in Greek, it's Christo, right? Means Messiah. It's the one that's going to save everybody. And many Jewish men and women at the time were looking for that Savior that were going to come. That was going to come to save the Jewish people. What they didn't understand is Jesus wouldn't come just to save the Jewish people. He would come to save all of mankind. And so right after Peter professes that Jesus is the Christ, right after that, in the same conversation, we have this next passage. It says, and this is Jesus, who's the he, right? And he strictly charged them and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Right, and if any of us who grew up in church, we know this, right? This is the first of 3 times that Jesus actually predicts his death. And after Peter identifies Jesus as the Christ of God, Jesus predicts his own death and resurrection. 3 times in the Gospel of Luke, we see Jesus predict his own death. But it is interesting to me of where this falls in the conversation, right? 5,000 people are fed. It's a miracle. Jesus performs a miracle, feeds all these people. And then Peter professes that Jesus is the one, is the Savior. And immediately after this, Jesus says, don't tell anybody this, but just so you know, I'm going to have to suffer and die. And 3 days later, I'm going to be raised again. Later in Luke, it tells us they don't understand what Jesus means when he's saying this, which it seems pretty clear to me. But God made it so they wouldn't understand. But when Peter confessed Jesus was the Messiah, right? Jesus gave a detailed description of how his actions revealed his messianic nature. So essentially what this means is Peter says, Jesus, you're the Christ. And Jesus goes, you're right. And let me tell you how I'm going to get victory. Let me tell you how I'm going to save the world. And then he shows this plan that is not what seems like victory to many of us. You see, Jesus professed that his victory would be through death. And this actually flies in the face of most of our understanding of what it means to win. Because while most of us winning is like me and I just decimate my son in board games, right? We think that victory is just winning, but Jesus found victory not through winning, but through losing. Because by all measures of our understanding of cultural, what happened is when Jesus died, it was a losing thing. But if you've grown up in the church, we don't really view it that way, but that's how the rest of the world would view it. If you kill the general on the battlefield, you've pretty much won. Jesus chose a different path to victory. Jesus redefined how to win by choosing to lose. Growing up, I played Little League, and my mom would come to all of my Little League games, and she had like one of these like voices that I could, even if I'm in the outfield, I can hear my mom screaming. And I remember, right, I was on the Braves growing up. It was my baseball team then, and still is now. And I was always a Brave growing up, and I remember I could hear her in the outfield. I'm in the outfield. She's in the stands. And I remember I'm standing there, waiting for something to get hit to me, and I could hear my mom just screaming, "Look alive, Braves! Look alive! Hustle! Look alive!" And there's something, and I mean, we even tell our sports teams this today, right? Come on, look alive, team, let's go. Because if something looks dead, that is not usually a pathway to victory. So we want our teams to look like they have life in them. Right? We talk about, if you're a sports fan, you talk about often about the momentum change of a game, the momentum swings, and how it can give your team new life. Death is not the way to victory, but Jesus redefined how we win by choosing to lose. He chose death on the cross. And in so he found victory, because when he died for us. And he defeated sin and he defeated death when he rose from the dead. Right, that's the ultimate like mic drop victory. Like, oh, like death, yeah, that's just like a 3-day like glitch on my calendar. Like other than that, I'm back. Right, he chose that pathway. And he redefined what winning would look like by choosing to sacrifice himself. Right after Jesus predicts his own death, we have another passage, and it kind of walks right along in this conversation that Jesus is having with the disciples, where they confess that he's the Christ. Jesus kind of shows them the plan, even if they don't understand it, with how he would attain victory through death. And then he does something very different, right? He tells them how people can follow him into that victory. And this is what he said. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Now, I know most of us know this, but just in case you're here, you may be watching online and you don't, right? The cross is the Roman execution device, right? It is the electric chair, the lethal injection of the time. And when Jesus said this, right, we as Christians read this and we know that Jesus died on the cross and rose again. When he said this, that had not occurred yet. And so what he's telling them is, hey, if you really want to follow me, then you're going to have to go die a criminal's death every single day. You're going to have to deny yourself and every day be willing to take up that criminal's death. He says, you want to follow me? You have to be willing to die to yourself. You want to follow me? My pathway is to death. If you're following me, you have to have the same pathway. It's difficult to preach a passage like this because we don't live in a culture that celebrates dying to oneself, really like limiting oneself to anything. I mean, like the most self-restriction we have is what, like our diets, our savings accounts, right? We deny ourselves food so that we look better. We deny ourselves pleasure so that we can have better vacations or bigger retirements or better houses. We don't really grasp as an American culture the idea of denying ourselves something. We work hard to get things for ourselves. We don't want to deny ourselves of anything. But in a culture that promotes free love, self-expressed gender identity, and self-identified truth, the sense of self has become the most pervasive form of idol worship. Right? At the time of Jesus, right, in the ancient Middle East, idols were physical images, right? Families had their own little idols that they would even keep with them. We read about this a little bit more in the Old Testament with Jacob and some of his wives. At the time the New Testament is written, right, there's idols, there's temples that are built to Jupiter and Zeus. There's the Roman cult, which is worship of Caesar himself. And there's these graven images, these carved stones that people would actually worship this idol. We don't have that as much in today's culture. The idol that we see the most is the one that looks back at us in the mirror. We are a culture that is obsessed with self. We were on a vacation. Once growing up, and I think it was going into my senior year of high school. And this is one of those stories we tell in our family, like the family lore stories. And it was me and my two older sisters, and we are on this vacation. We're in Virginia Beach. We're at this hotel resort. It's kind of getting close to lunchtime, but the activity for the morning that we had decided on was like a puzzle. Right? And so my mom has been actively working on this puzzle, trying to finish it. And I think just for like the 100th time we said, Mom, we are hungry. We would like to go get lunch. And this is a lesson to you parents if you have younger children. They're never going to stop telling you they're hungry. And my mom, was done, right? And she turned to us and she said, I cannot believe I have raised such selfish children. Selfish, selfish, selfish. Right? And we repeat that often. And it's become a joke. And she may be watching this right now, and I may get a text after service sharing the story. But in one sense, we laugh about it because we were hungry. It was lunchtime. We wanted to eat. But in another sense, she wasn't wrong. Because we are all selfish. We look at preserving what we want. We look for our own victory. We look out for our own self-interest. And it's not that we don't care for other people. We are just conditioned to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We have the American dream where we can work hard and get whatever we want. Here's the only problem with that. I think it's counterintuitive to what we see Jesus telling us to do. But then what happens when we run into other people? And this is, I think, where we really get into the crux of this. It's because we tend to look at others and point our fingers and identify those we disagree with as the problem. But in doing so, we fall victim to self-righteousness and idolatry. It's all their fault. If only people agreed with me. We've made it even worse, right? When we look at someone who posts something online we disagree with, we don't just choose to judge the comment they made, we judge the person. God, I'm writing this and I was convicted this week of doing this to somebody. I have a college friend that posted something online and I went, why would they post that? What an idiot. But the truth is, we live in a nation that is polarized by division right now. There was a study done, and the first time it was done was in the 1980s, where Americans were asked about how they felt about individuals in the opposing political party. So they asked Republicans about Democrats, they asked Democrats about Republicans. How do you feel about people in the opposing political party? And in the 1980s, just over 50% of those polled, viewed the opposite party as less than. Individuals, not the party, but individuals in the opposite party. That means if I have a political leaning and you have the opposite political leaning and we live in the 80s, right, just about 50% of people look at the individuals in the other party and think less of them. They've continued that research over the last several decades. And here's the thing, none of you are going to be surprised by this. Because over 80% of Americans view people, individuals, in the opposing political party as less than. Not the parties, but the people. And I'm afraid if I ask for a show of hands who's guilty of that, everyone else will be raising their hand with me. Because I've done that. But Jesus invites us to do something different. You see, Jesus invites us to follow him by laying down our self-interest for something more. Now, don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying we lay it down something that's important to us to agree with someone else. I'm saying we lay down sometimes our self-interest for something that is bigger than us, that is not a man-made concept, but a God-made concept. The passage continues, and this is what it says in verse 24. For whoever would save his life will lose it. You want victory? Be willing to lose. Whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. If we deny ourselves to follow Jesus, that's how we find victory. That's how we find salvation. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and the holy angels. Jesus tells his disciples that the only way to save their lives is to lose them, which seems counterintuitive. It seems like that shouldn't work. Again, it's not the natural way to victory. It's not our normal path to how we win. But Jesus didn't come to follow the normal path. He came for an upside down kingdom. In fact, when he was with his disciples and washing their feet, he said that he came not to be served, but to serve. The King of Kings, God of the entire universe, came to serve, not to be served. And so when he tells them the only way to save their lives is to lose them, what he's telling them is you've got to stop finding your identity in you, and you've got to start finding your identity in me. We talk about this when we talk about our 3 circles in our Discover Lighthouse class, right? Is that we are born with this self-identity. I am me. We have all these things that describe our characters, right? It's like we have, we live our lives filling out like online profiles about who we are. But what Jesus is saying is you need to deny yourself who you are and recognize that your identity doesn't come from you. Your identity needs to come from me. To save your life, you've got to be willing to lose it. You've got to be willing to lay it down. Jesus achieved victory by losing and invited us to do the same. Give up your life to gain something that's better, that's more. But as long as we follow self-interest as our primary motivator in life, we'll lose at the end. And man, we are so good at having self-interest, aren't we? Like we're really good at it. Look, Father's Day is coming up. You know what that means? That next week there's going to be collections of dad all across the country talking about that new little gadget they got that's going to make their lives better. We work so hard to save up our money and vacation days so that we can go and have like these wonderful experiences. You know what we don't do? We don't get the new gadget. We don't save for that vacation. We don't go buy the things that we've wanted just to go to our neighbor and go, here you go. I wanted this, but it's yours now. We don't deny ourselves. We work hard to achieve for ourselves. We want, and then we work hard to get what we want. That's the pathway that we have as a culture for victory. This is why this is a hard concept I think, for Americans to really grasp, especially in our context where most of us aren't worried about where our next meal is coming from. We're comfortable. We have the luxury of having desires and working to get our desires. But what Jesus says is you've got to be willing to lose. You've got to lay down your life. You've got to give up that self-interest, that idol of self, for something more. Because following yourself will lead to an eternity that is separated from God. We call that hell. And here's the thing, right? Most of us in this room at some point in our lives have made a decision to follow Jesus. We've made a decision to deny ourselves to follow him so that we can have that relationship with God. We've had these big moments in life where we will rededicate ourselves. We'll go to the conferences or we'll have a great church service where something will be said or something resonates with us, or we'll read a book and we'll see this truth again. And it's so refreshing to us to recognize, yes, Jesus is the only way. It's not about me, it's about him. We have those moments. But then the further we get from those moments, I think the easier it is for us to fall back into these patterns of self-interest and working hard just to get what's ours. I was a youth pastor for a long time, and one of the things that we loved to do was take youth kids to camp. And camp was this incredible experience where students would go and they would have this incredible moment with God. They would talk about these mountaintop experiences, these spiritual highs. And they would have these legitimate, real interactions with God. And when they would come home from camp, we would see these kids who were passionate about their faith, passionate about loving other people and serving other people. But I could almost put it on a graph that as further in we got into the fall school year, the more that dipped. And it was the same every single year, because this is what we saw. All of a sudden, when you put these kids back into these school situations where they have their extracurricular activities, They've got their sports. They've got these friend groups. They have influences that are not just church or their parents. Their faith or their commitment to their faith dwindles, and they're searching for self-interest, or they're gratifying their self-interest goes up. Every year. We saw it again and again and again. And no matter what we tried, we couldn't really ever stop it. We didn't cancel camp, but we went into this idea that if our goal is not this sustainable, like camp high, right? Our goal should be, we want them to grasp as much truth as they can in these moments. And so summer, which is usually a time off for most ministries, right? Most small groups even take a break in summer. We decided, let's not do that. Let's lean in and use this time as really emphasis for growth. If the kids are going to be on fire for God in these moments, let's show them, let's teach them, let's help them grow in this. And let's utilize what we have in the moments, in the times that we have. Here's the thing. I don't think we're that different as adults. I think we have our own spiritual experiences that are these incredible moments, and I think there's value to those. And the further we get away from those, we could graph our kind of relationship with God, and it would go down. As our desire for self, our self-interests go up. So what if we did something different, though? What if it wasn't about the moment? What if our goal wasn't getting as high as possible in these big, incredible moments? What if we didn't go from mountaintop to mountaintop? What if we did something different? I think Jesus actually tells us the answer in this passage. Because following Jesus requires a daily commitment to set aside what we desire to follow what Jesus has called us to do. So there's two questions in this, right? Or there's two things in this. One, he told us to take up our cross, not from those moment-to-moment experiences, but to take up our cross daily, every single day. There is this commitment to follow Jesus every single day. Right? Especially for those of us who've made the decision to commit our lives to him. We do believe that there's a moment where an individual chooses to follow Jesus, but then every day we have to be willing to take up that cross and lay down ourselves every single day. And it's not a moment-to-moment experience, it's a day-to-day. So that we can follow what Jesus has called us to do. But here's the question after that is, well, what does he call us to do? And how do we legitimately live this out? There's a passage I want to look at in Matthew chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22, verse 34. Is one of those passages that you'll probably be familiar with that says this. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. And look, again, we talk about the culture of victory, right? The Pharisees saw what Jesus did to this. The Pharisees were a political group. The Sadducees were also a political group. And the Pharisees saw that Jesus defeated the Sadducees. They were like, well, it's our turn now. We want to win. So they're trying to trick him. They're trying to trap Jesus. So they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And the law is specifically referring to a portion of the Old Testament. What is the greatest commandment that we see in all the law? And Jesus responded this way. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and prophets. All of the Old Testament, all of Scripture falls under these two laws. And if you know anything about the Old Testament in the law, what you're going to recognize is what Jesus told him is something that they would have known already. Right? We quote this a lot as Jesus, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. But when he would say this to Jewish men or women, they would know exactly what he was referring to, because what he was referring to was an Old Testament prayer that God gave the people of Israel after they'd been saved from Egypt. In fact, it's called the Shema, and it is the oldest and longest, most continued prayer in history, right? We've been praying this prayer for thousands of years. And in it, God makes his promise with Israel that he is one God. There's only one God. And that they are to love him and worship him. And just as they love him, they are to love other people. And so what Jesus is showing is Jesus prioritizes our love and right relationship with God. When we are living in a good relationship with God, he shows us what that love relationship looks like. And the first thing is this, right? Love God first with all that you are. With everything about you. Heart, soul, mind, strength, right? Love God with all of who you are. We can all agree, like, this is a good thing, right? We're supposed to love God with all of our hearts, yes? Yeah. Yes, Joel. We want to love God. God, come on, guys. We're in church. If you're not saying you want to love God, like, you may be in the wrong place on a Sunday morning. We want to love God with all of who we are. But there's a second part of this. Jesus challenges us to love other people above our self-interests. He says, love your neighbor as yourself. And some of you may be going, well, isn't that like, I just have to love them as much as I love me, right? Like, so I don't have to love them more than I love me. Your idol's the one in the mirror. Jesus challenges us to love other people above our self-interests. Guys, I love some people. I love a lot of people. That's hard for me. I like me a lot. Obviously, like, I like winning more than I even want my own kids to win. How am I supposed to love my neighbor like that? But we're supposed to love others above our self-interest. And I do think this is a challenge because this is hard for most of us. It's hard for us to love people at that level. It's hard for us to be selfless. But this is what Jesus tells us to do. And this is why it's not a one-time decision. Okay, we got it. I made the decision to love other people more than me. I'm good. That's why we have to deny ourselves every single day. Be willing to die to who we are to follow Jesus. And in doing so, we love God with all of who we are. And we love people above our own self-interest. And sometimes that means that we're going to have our pride take a back seat. And our political affiliations may have to be less important to us than our Jesus affiliations. And I know we nod our heads and think yes to this, but guys, it's so much easier to watch Fox News or CNN than it is to get in the Word of God. We consume ourselves with this stuff. Our culture is telling us why we should hate someone else, but Jesus is demanding that we deny ourselves to love somebody. And it's not easy, and it is hard because we do disagree with so much. And I'm not asking you to agree with them. I'm asking you to love them above the disagreement. Because Jesus died for them, and Jesus is going to call them to deny themselves, to love you. And if we can live in this, even if we could just live in this as the church of Jesus, oh, what we could do. How many more people would come to know him because we are a people known for our love for each other? But it is a daily commitment. It is deciding every single day that you love Jesus more than you love yourself, and you're going to love other people more than your self-interest. There's a lot easier paths in life where this is the only path I know to ultimate victory, and that is a victory that comes through Jesus. We can work all our lives, but if we're not willing to lose our lives to follow him, we're going to miss it, guys. And we as a church have the opportunity to model this, to show people how much we love one another, to deny ourselves to follow him.